computer. Hello and welcome to the Josh and Tyler Show. Today we are talking Oscar predictions. I'm here with Tyler, as always, with 2S for fucking fantastic. How's it rolling, man?
It's rolling about as well as it could possibly get.
I've been trying to say how's it rolling because I really want someone to go rolling, you know. No, if anyone knows the Limp Biscuits, that's what I'm trying to get the reaction out of people. It's not working.
Oh, I thought you were getting Rawhide from the Blues Brothers or something.
That is a great moment. That's the only song they can play in the tavern without getting beer bottles thrown at them.
Well, that and Stand By Your Man, but everybody remembers Rawhide more.
Fair. Also not a bad little show. So Oscars this year. How do you think we compare from this year to last year's Oscar movies?
Well, it's really tough, but I feel like since this year was technically a better year for movies, since theaters were open longer, more stuff was getting made under the right guidelines. Whatever you consider the right guidelines is completely questionable, but there are a lot more choices, and I think there are a lot more different genres this year that the Academy can choose to recognize whether or not they decide to do. We talked about this when we were deciding the category, but the new rules in this are getting more and more ridiculous and crowd-pleasing. Everybody had that controversy about how Birdman, even though it should have gotten a nomination for Best Score, because that drum music was insane, because they threw in Mozart in there, it's just like, well, no, you can't do that. Then all of a sudden, I guess a couple of years ago or something like that, it switched from, oh, well, you can actually have 60% of original music to qualify for Best Original Score. This year, it's 35% original music as a requirement, which means that just about anything can get nominated. And I find that really weird.
I mean, that at that point, the Suicide Squad could get a nomination, even though it's mostly greatest hits montages. So,
yeah, and that also made Best Original Score a really hard topic for me to pick because I remember the soundtracks more than I do original scores, with a few obvious exceptions. But
we're gonna get to all these categories: pictures, scores, screenplay. We did for the sake of this video combine sound and sound mixing just to make our lives easier, and we did combine Best Original Screenplay, just adapted screenplay, just because I don't think anyone really wants to go super in depth to.
Well, I don't want to go super in depth, but I did make an original and adapted list. It was tough, but I do have those narrowed down pretty evenly, and I don't want to go too in depth about it, but you can sum up what makes these screenplays good in one or two sentences.
So I think the one thing about this year's Oscars that is different from last year's Oscars is I'm going to watch them.
I'm still not 100% convinced that I'm going to.
I mean, I'll be hosting. So if you are in the area and the Princess Cinema is allowed to do things, I'll be hosting the Oscars with my terrible jokes and my wittiness. So last year we were unable to do it because our province was locked down. So I didn't get a chance to catch them at all. So, but if there is the opportunity, I'm a pretty cool Oscar host. We give out posters and have a great time. So, if you don't have to see toothpaste commercials or like a new ad for whatever movie's coming out, you're like, there's that Josh guy.
You know what? That does sound a lot more tempting. I might hit you up on that because that'll take place near the end of March.
I believe it's the 22nd is the Oscars. What's the date on the Oscars there?
I think it's the 27th of
March 27th. It's a Sunday. Yeah, I've been hosting the Oscars for long as I've been there. That's my gig. Let's jump into this. Let's start with Best Actor. Who do you got for your nominations?
We're getting right into the nitty-gritty.
They always start with Best Actor, Actress right there at the beginning of the ceremonies.
Okay, so if I were to pick Best Actor, the nominees would be Nicolas Cage for Pig, Timothée Chalamet for Dune. You saw that coming, didn't you?
I mean, he was really good in the movie, by all means. Like, he did a great job. So I know a lot of people say he didn't have much, like, they didn't like him in the movie, but he did great, I think, for what he was given to work with. So,
see, I thought he was good first time around, and then on second and third viewing, he really grew on me. And actually made me like him more than Rebecca Ferguson, because on first viewing, Rebecca Ferguson was my favorite character. But you got those two. Andrew Garfield for Tick Tick Boom, Dev Patel for The Green Knight, and Joaquin Phoenix for Come On, Come On.
I went in the complete opposite direction there. I do have Joaquin Phoenix and Andrew Garfield for Tick Tick Boom and Come On, Come On. I have Bradley Cooper for Nightmare Alley because I do think he carried the entire film. I have Benedict Cumberbatch for Power of the Dog because I think this is one of the only few nominations it will get, as well as Will Smith for King Richard. I think that was definitely his film for sure.
Yeah.
So I didn't really think it would be really nice if Dev Patel got a nomination. I don't know if he will. I think the Green Knight might pick up some screenplay awards or some cinematography or stuff later on, but I don't quite know. Now, I did pick Bradley Cooper as my main winner here because I really like his performance in here, and the movie is pretty much all him. Excuse me.
Yeah, you're good. Let's
head cold. And who did you pick as your winner, Tyler?
If it were up to me, I would actually pick Dev Patel for The Green Knight because he surprised me so much in this film. Not that he hasn't played characters like this before, and no doubt the story and the amount of imagery that he's reacting to can definitely help with that, but I love the arc that he goes through where he has to start off as immature of a rich brat as you could possibly get, and over the course of the movie slowly but surely have to be saddled with more responsibility to manage so that he can gain his independence, be his own man, become an even braver person, because without spoiling it for those who haven't seen the movie, he's in a life or death situation that he is incredibly reluctant to go along with, but he's being pushed through it by people who either don't have his best intentions in mind or do, but are really putting his life on the line in the process of doing so.
Yeah, Green Knight for me was probably one of the biggest surprises of the year because the trailer gave away absolutely nothing. The trailer literally was like, here's some fantastical things going on. And so he did a really good job. I just don't know. I hope the Academy honors it. If he won, I would not be upset by any means. That would be lovely.
Yeah, for sure.
I think Bradley Cooper has a very strong chance of taking it here. I know I'm with the safe choices. Like these are the 5 safest choices in the Academy, but I genuinely think that Will Smith did a great job, and Benedict Cumberbatch in The Power of the Dog did a really good job. Joaquin Phoenix and Andrew Garfield, obviously. And then, yeah, I think that, you know, as safe as these are, they're pretty good picks. It's not like they acted bad at all. So,
yeah, I mean, honestly, I didn't even consider Andrew Garfield that safe of a choice because I didn't even know he could sing before I saw Tick Tick Boom. But he also handled the dramatic stuff on a much higher level than I've ever seen from him before, where he actually made me tear up from time to time, especially towards the end where he's being saddled with all the personal setbacks and the professional failures that he has to experience over time. The arc that the real life Jonathan Larson went through, where he has to balance how much time to spend on something that he has absolutely no idea whether or not it'll work compared to spending time with people who have your back, even though you're too big of a workaholic to do the exact same.
Yeah, well, Dev Patel wins. I wouldn't be upset, but I'm sort of rooting for Bradley Cooper over here. Let's jump into Best Supporting Actor. I will. So for my nominations, I have Mark Rylance from Don't Look Up, Andrew Garfield from The Eyes of Tammy Faye, Richard Jenkins from Nightmare Alley, Adrian Brody from French Dispatch, and my winner, Ciarán Hinds from Belfast. Who do you got nominated and winning on your end?
Okay, so for supporting actor, I have Alex Wolff for Pig. He was the biggest surprise of that movie because I've never been that big of a fan of his. I like him, but some of his career choices, not counting Naked Brothers, obviously, didn't always click with me, but he had that great arc of having to go from a cliched scumbag to someone who is dealing with a lot of personal troubles stemming from his parents and the amount of not necessarily abuse, but neglect that he gets from his dad, Adam Arkin. And he carried so much of it without even having to say a word in the same way that Nicolas Cage did. So his performance alone fits in with the movie's don't judge a book by its cover mentality, which also was what made Cage's performance among the best of his career, if not the best. I have Woody Norman from Come On, because this is a kid performance where on paper it sounds fucking ridiculous, but he made it work. He made it seem believable and sympathetic, even though if you were in Joaquin Phoenix's position having to deal with his daily antics, it wouldn't exactly be stress-free like any parent relationship would be. I have you probably haven't heard of this one, Fun Wei from 1 Second. And 1 Second is that Hong Kong movie that I saw at TIFF this year.
Oh,
I don't know.
I didn't get a chance to see this. So there's a lot of movies on here that you'll notice to be like, oh, you haven't seen that one? Well, it's really hard to find Oscar picks. So
I don't know how many people have seen it, because I don't know if it actually got distribution yet. I know that Neon, that one distribution company, has the US rights to it, but I don't know if it qualifies anywhere else, or even if just being in film festivals alone could make it qualify. But this guy plays Mr. Movie, a guy who runs this movie theater in what I believe to be 40s China during the first communist rule. And this was back in a day and age where people went to the movies on a regular, almost daily basis. And the director said in an opening interview before the movie that back in his day and age, people would walk for miles, for hours, just to go to the next movieplex and stay up all night if it meant getting through their daily troubles as best as they can. And this movie communicates that so well in the character of Mr. Movie. Everyone views him as a god, and based on how meticulous and actually a lot of time-consuming effort that goes into projecting a movie, whether it be protecting the photographic film, working on the screen, organizing everybody so that they don't cause a scene or anything like that, and just putting on a good show, he earns all of that effort. And he also has that R. Lee Ermey or J.K. Simmons and Whiplash mentality, where you make the slightest mistake in trying to help him, and he will roast you to death to make sure that you improve upon yourself. You become a lot more hardworking, considerate, and grateful for the amount of effort that he puts into giving a good show. I have that kind of mentality that maybe like the Minari grandma, he would get some a little more consideration. It probably won't happen, but I absolutely loved his performance. Alex Hassell from The Tragedy of Macbeth is one of those side characters that I don't remember studying in high school, and apparently they expanded upon the role by blending in two other characters of his. But what I loved is that he's the one character who presents himself as an ally to Macbeth in one scene, and then a friend to Macbeth's enemies in the other, and you have absolutely no idea whose side he's on, even when he shows his true intentions. And you kind of wonder if he's actually doing the best for other people or for himself. And that's a much more complex Shakespearean character than I would associate with someone like him. And as I said in my review, it more than makes up for him fucking up that Cowboy Bebop role of his.
They made the TV series, right? They made a season of that or whatever.
Yeah, he's the guy with the weird white mullet.
I watched a couple episodes. It didn't blow me away, but I've never been a big Bebop fan, so I just curiosity.
The anime is so much better.
I mean, Chris Stuckman, that's where I learned about Bebop, so
that's his thing. Just like you, my winner for Best Supporting Actor would be Ciarán Hinds for Belfast, because he was just so lovable. Dude is as cliched of a movie grandpa as you can get in the best possible way. I said this before in my review, but he had this Sally Field and Forrest Gump thing where he had a way of making slogans and common catchphrases sound metaphorical so that he can talk on the same emotional level to his grandson without ever having to spell things out or spoon feed to him.
Yeah, there was that level of him in the film where everything he did felt like what the kid would be like when he's that age. He's now 60, 70 years old, living in Belfast, and he's experienced this through the eyes of like, if that kid grew up, which the kid did a great job, and the whole cast for Belfast is very, very well done. But if that kid was older, that's what would be how he would react to all this. That's who he would be. And the grandfather is an exact reflection of the kid. And he was just so charming. Like the one line that I fully remember, I'm going to try to get it right, but forgive me here if I quote it wrong. It was charming. It was funny. He's like, he's talking about the airplane wing, the only time not to take a leak or whatever. What's the only time not to use the washroom or something? He's like, when you're on an airplane wing or something. And it's like the stupidest line ever, but like, it's very heartwarming. And I'm just like, this is delightful. and then he does play a big part of it in the movie, which I wish they had spent a little more time on, the death of his character there. Again, this is spoiler world. If you haven't seen these movies, you probably shouldn't be here. Because I mean, we got to talk about him, right? And the grandfather is the driving force for the story. As much as Judi Dench is really, really good in this, and not taking anything away from her, I think he is the MVP. Now, you looked at mine and said, "What's wrong with you here?" Which ones were? Because my choice is
I don't have a problem with any of these. Because
Mark, I think Don't Look Up's not going to get a lot of Oscars.
Yeah, that was it.
What I think it's going to do is strictly because if you get nominated for an Oscar, you get nominated again. And Mark Rylance won for Bridge of Spies. I think based strolly on that, he beat out Stallone for a lifetime achievement. And we've gone into all of that. Literally for a character he's been playing for years. For Mark Rylance, people like him. He's a very, very safe choice. I think he's going to get a nomination. Andrew Garfield, I know I have him in my best actor nominations, but I think he was really good in The Eyes of Tammy Faye as this character. I think Andrew Garfield may be one of the better actors that we've just sort of been like, well, he was in The Amazing Spider-Man. He was moody and weird. And like, I feel like we've just not given him enough credit for what he's doing. So I put him on this list twice.
I mean, after Amazing Spider-Man, he did Hacksaw Ridge, and a lot of people gave him credit for that, myself included. He was phenomenal in that one. And I didn't think after Hacksaw Ridge he could get any better until I saw Tick, Tick, Boom, or even Eyes of Tammy Faye, because he made a complete scumbag seem sympathetic by giving us exactly what we expected. That whole thing where he feels that God hasn't given him enough in life, which is why he takes advantage of anyone he can, even his own wife. Yep. And he added some complexity that probably isn't there in real life. If you Google what Jim Baker's up to nowadays, he wouldn't have learned a damn thing. And the movie does kind of sidestep that.
I honestly never watched any of Jim Baker. So for me, like, I know a little bit because my dad used to watch the 700 Club with Pat Robertson, but all I know is Pat Robertson is weird. And that's pretty much the level of knowledge I had going into the movie.
Weird's not even describing that.
I heard like, I mean, one time I was flipping around the channels and it's like, pray away COVID. I was like, what?
That's more than likely a Jim Baker thing.
It was weird. Pat Robertson or something. I don't know. But then my other one here, Adrian Brody. He was my favorite part of the French Dispatch. He was this cool artist. It was the storyline everyone liked. Everyone coming out of French Dispatch liked the artist storyline. That film they did, that black and white film, like that was, everyone's like, the first part was pretty good, but that film in the prison, that's great. And Adrian Brody is an Oscar level actor. I mean, even in his lesser performances in King Kong, he gives it 100%. I think he gets a nomination. I don't think he wins because Ciarán Hinds is in the race. But he did a really good job in this. It was either that or Del Toro from me for the French Dispatch, but I felt like Adrian Brody had a lot more to do and worked with that material really well.
See, I wanted to put Benicio del Toro from French Dispatch on there so much because he made me laugh the most. And I also considered Cillian Murphy from Quiet Place 2 because he was one of, if not the best characters in that movie. But I don't know, like there was something about it where I didn't have time to rewatch the movie to make sure that I was making the right decision there. And on top of that, these other performances, I remember within an instant why I love them so much.
Yeah, I mean,
as opposed to the other ones where I just remember liking it and not much else.
Funny you should mention Quiet Place Part 2 because that was one of them I was considering. I was sitting here, I don't know, 7:30, 8 o'clock this morning whenever I got up, and I was just like, man, but like A Quiet Place 2, like he was really good in that movie.
Yeah, it's tough. It's really damn tough.
I mean, but this is the first one we're in agreement with. I honestly, if he doesn't win it, the Academy is not as predictable as I thought they did. And it's not like it's being predictable. Way, I just loved this performance by him. He was the heart of the movie at the end of the day.
Yeah. I'd be blown away if he didn't at least get a nomination, because there's no way he's not getting it.
He's got to get a nomination. He's so darn good. Let's jump to special effects or visual effects, whatever you want to call it. Labeled special effects. Who you got nominated?
So for special effects, I have The Green Knight, because I don't associate big budget special effects with an A24 movie. And I always thought that this was going to be like their biggest because it was medieval. But I think there are actually a few movies of theirs that were technically more expensive. And the blend of practical effects, like having Ralph Ineson, it covered entirely in prosthetics and makeup throughout the entire time that he was the Green Knight, mixed in with all that stuff like the giants, the talking fox. The CGI was actually pretty well incorporated and a lot better than I thought it would be. I have a very obvious choice, Spider-Man No Way Home, because these movies are tailor-made to have good special effects to the point where even though you notice them right away, they're incredibly well detailed. They're as seamless as you can possibly get. That mirror dimension fight from No Way Home alone totally deserves it, the nomination anyways. No Time to Die being another fairly obvious one.
For special effects?
Yeah.
Okay, well, because I've watched that movie a bunch and it's mostly practical. I'm trying to think what the special effects would be.
I know, but there's
not that I don't want it to be nominated. I just can't figure out.
There's always something that's been touched up. But I mean, look at Tenet and how practical it was, and it still won special effects because of how much had to be incorporated and as flawlessly as possible. Like Tenet was good, not great, but it definitely deserved best visual effects on that part.
I actually have yet to see Tenet. So those are your five?
What's that?
Those are your five for special effects then?
No, I've only got 3 so far.
Oh, okay. I would throw in Shang-Chi, the Legend of Seven Rings, specifically because they have dragons in the finale. So that's special effects heavy.
The effects were fine, but
I mean, I don't think it's going to win, but
better.
It is a notable special effects. I just don't know if Disney will get multiples. I also had Spider-Man No Way Home, The Green Knight, and Godzilla versus Kong. Probably is going to get a nomination. That's the only place it's going to get anything.
Probably.
Is your winner what I'm thinking it is?
Well, there's one that I haven't mentioned yet that might surprise some people.
Okay.
I would put Last Night in Soho up for best visual effects because it has that whole technique of having to blend Thomasin McKenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy within the same scene as a reflection. And there's so many long take sequences where both of them make physical contact with the same person, whether it be in real life or in their reflection. And there has to be carefully placed details like where to put the camera, whether or not it was done with composite shots or if one of them was embracing a body double. There's literally a long take dance sequence where as Matt Smith is holding Taylor-Joy's hand, once he swings her in a dance, it instantly switches to Mackenzie while he's holding her hand. And I'm just sitting there and I'm going, how the fuck did they do that? That was the scene that really got me into the movie. And it's proof that Edgar Wright can handle special effects like this. And it's one of the few movies where horror movies can actually be elevated by special effects as opposed to being bogged down. Because you're so used to CGI creatures and head turnings and stuff like that. Whereas this one, the effects serve as more of a psychological purpose.
I mean, my winner is Dune. That's the one I think. I think Dune's going to take this. The blend of special effects and practical and blue screen and green screen and rear projection, literally all the technology they used on this, amazing. I know the sand was fake in the desert, but that looks like some real sand to me.
Well, funny thing, I actually have seen more behind the scenes stuff that I could get my hands on when it comes to Dune. And the amazing thing is there were scenes where they didn't even use a blue or green screen. They used what was called a sand screen. That was basically brown/orange because they couldn't use the LED lights that the Mandalorian has, which I found really hard to believe because that just seems like a gimme. And it also is a bit of a bigger risk because it's closer to the actor's skin color. There were so many opportunities where that could have fucked up so easily, but they made it work.
I mean, yeah, Dune is the coolest looking movie of the year. that's my whole thought process on this. I haven't seen anything that looks better. It's not my favorite of the year, but nothing looks better visually wise. Is Dune your pick for number one there for the winner?
What do you think?
I'm gonna go with yes.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to discuss: best original score. Who do you have here?
Okay, so I have Daniel Hart for The Green Knight because the music was pretty decent. It was one of the first things that got me instantly clicked with the film. I loved how it portrayed the medieval setting through the instruments and through the more folktale style music. I mean, there were obviously one or two songs that they didn't come up with on their own, but it still sounds amazing. I have Alexandre Desplat's musical score for The French Dispatch that was absolutely whimsical and put a smile on my face every time there was a brand new song. It fit the atmosphere of the movie so perfectly.
Yeah, this one was on my list too. French Dispatch is the least, it was the most charming. Everyone wanted to go clean up French Dispatch at the theater because the credits were nice music and everyone liked it. I mean, I can tell you which song we hated cleaning up from. Remember at the end of Eyes of Tammy Faye? Do you remember that?
Was it like the one that she was singing at the concert?
Something about, like, oh no, Mr. Alligator, you're getting eaten. And it was just like, please stop.
Thankfully don't remember
but yeah, French Dispatch. I know it was a lot of classical and such mixed in there, but a delightful score, absolutely delightful score. I also have French Dispatch on here for myself. So,
okay, so number 3, I've got Dan Romer, the score for Luca. It just fits the era and the setting so nicely that it does legitimately sound like traditional Italian music to the point where they actually got famous Italian singers of the era this takes place in to come back and record some brand new material, which I found very fascinating. And much like French Dispatch, the music is so uplifting and cheerful, and it fits the laid-back slice of life story that Luca has that made it such a damn good movie to watch.
I have on my list. I went with for score. I put the original song in here. I think that West Side Story is going to get a nomination. Because it's
here's the thing. Here's the problem though. Like, there's no brand new music or brand new songs, so that might be a tough one.
I also think that I'm going to throw a controversial one out here. I think that Annette gets nominated for best original score because Annette is weird, man. But it's got an original score and it's a musical.
That's fair.
Adam Driver's good in it. That's about what I can say about it. It's not for me.
No.
It is strange. I sat through a large majority of this thing and was just like, who is this for? That was my whole thought process. But the music was pretty good.
Most of it, anyways.
I will also throw Encanto up there. I think they'll get best original score for this one. I did Encanto instead of Luca. But I think best original score is going to go to a Hans Zimmer of the year, and I don't think it's going to be No Time to Die. I think it's going to be Dune once again. As much as I didn't like the sound mixing, it's not about the sound mixing here. I think the music was far too loud at certain points in the film, but it's about how good does it sound on its own. I think they had a great score and they had a lot of great themes. You could pinpoint the score for when his father was dying and they brought those elements back later. The score itself felt very original, while all sort of containing to this similar vibe that they had going on. I think it's interesting how when Timothée Chalamet was talking to the gentleman with the trees there before they destroyed him, they had this sort of soft theme that they used later for him and Zendaya, and just all the themes and the composition and the way they laid it in there. It's just a really beautiful soundtrack. As much as I love No Time to Die, there's about 4 original songs and the rest is sort of just a background filler, because a couple of those songs are just incredible and get you pumped up. But Dune, I think, had the best score, and I think the Academy is going to honor that. I don't know. Who do you got winning yours?
I also went with Hans Zimmer for Dune. I mean, the dude made his own instruments recording the music for this. Like, that's how passionate he was for Dune based on the fact that he read and loved the book ever since he was a young boy. And there's so many it's so large in scope based on the composition, the overall sound of it. I love that he has so many background singers coming up with this supposedly brand new language, or they're just making up the sounds as they go along. It could be either one. The one lady who has that Paul's Dream sequence that's in all the trailers and is in the movie throughout the majority of it, I loved her voice. It does get repetitive after a while. I have no problem admitting that, but at the same time, like, she sounds so good. The Bene Gesserit theme, where it's so many ancestral voices going on at once, meanwhile these incredibly sinister and evil ladies dressed like nuns are walking through the rainstorm as they approach Paul. It just created such an ominous feel to it.
Yeah, this is a great score overall. I think Dune's going to take a lot of technical awards and a lot of music awards. As much I think it'd be really cool if it got Best Picture, I just don't think it's going to happen. It's cool.
Well,
what, you think it's going to get Best Picture?
I think it'll get nominated anyways.
I think
it does have a huge, and I think it does have a huge chance, depending on how many other technical achievements they end up winning.
But I think even like King Richard gets a Best Picture nomination, so I don't think that's going to win. Not that that's a bad movie by any means.
I'm not surprised by that either.
But yeah, the other ones I was thinking of, Godzilla versus Kong had a pretty badass score. I just don't think the Academy is going to honor that because it was exciting and epic, and it was a really, really great score for that. And then
I don't know. I mean, I almost went with Marco Beltrami for Quiet Place 2 because I can't say for sure how much of that music was original and what was brand new. They obviously recycled some stuff like any sequel would, but part of it is because I love Marco Beltrami as a composer. He has a wide range when it comes to making music for certain genres. One thing's for sure, when it comes to stuff like action and horror, he knows how to raise the intensity and come up with this incredibly fast pace that gets your heart wrenching all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know which award Quiet Place 2 is going to get, and I didn't really think about it till now. Let's just jump to sound mixing, and then you can talk about A Quiet Place Parts 2 sound mixing.
Well, I'm going to start with the nominations that I don't think have a chance, but we'll probably get it in there anyways. The Tragedy of Macbeth sound design really surprised me in how it created this amount of dread and suspense combined with Carter Burwell's musical score. That was another one that I thought about for a little bit, and because Carter Burwell works with the Coen brothers so much, he may get nominated anyways, but the sound effects impressed me so much more because the slightest sound can be amplified within the main characters' heads and creates this certain level of paranoia that definitely can resonate with any audience member who hasn't really experienced the play but is still drawn into the story. Like when Macbeth does kill King Duncan, the drops of blood that hit the floor are like drum beats every time they hit, because there's this level of anticipation whether or not Macbeth is going to be discovered at any given moment. And there are so many other sequences like that I can go on and on about that definitely amplify the suspense and the dread.
Yeah, Macbeth does have to do a lot because it is a simple strip back story with base characters. So sound design and cinematography are incredibly important to this. I will put one out there. I think that King Richard had a really good sound mix. Because they balanced popular music of the genres and times to get us through montages. The tennis balls always felt natural. It didn't feel like some fake thing at any time. And a key part of believability to that is making the tennis sound like tennis. It sounds sort of like it does on TV. They mixed it really well, and just a great mix of voices and music overall. And I think that the sound mixing particularly shown in the quiet moments, because you could hear them in the quiet moments, but in one of the louder moments where the police are called and the mother has to go across the street, they don't necessarily yell and they don't necessarily raise their voices. It's usually simple, profound statements, and it's all balanced so equally. I think it's one of the best mixed movies of the year. I think King Richard is really technically good, like really great, like behind the scenes, flawless.
Yeah, the tennis sequences, they do have the balls bouncing, the tennis players shouting every time they hit. The crowds surprised me a hell of a lot more, because that's one that sports movies don't tend to focus on, whether it comes to being realistic. It always sounds like we're in the arena with the audience members, as opposed to this one where, because not that many people go out to tennis matches, it does feel like we're watching it on a TV screen at home.
Well, I mean, it's you can do mixing very wrong. And as much as I love the Rocky franchise, and we brought Rocky up today, if you're watching Rocky 4, the crowd is so freaking loud. You'll be sitting on the couch watching Rocky 4, and they'll be doing the punches, and the punches are like boom, boom, boom. And then the crowd is like, Rocky, Rocky. And it's like so loud and in your face. And I'm just like, I know they're going to get you excited and such, but the mixing could be a lot better. And I hope that in a Drago cut, it is a little bit better there. So because we didn't notice it, King Richard, for sure. What's another one you got for sound mixing?
One that's fairly obvious is the new West Side Story, because it has the difficult challenge of having to mix the songs that were pre-recorded before filming, along with the dialogue that's interspliced between the music and just the normal conversations in it of itself. I've listened to the West Side Story soundtrack the most out of any other movie in 2021. And something that I noticed is that the lines of dialogue that are in the movie are actually woven into the soundtrack, which is interesting, because normally with a soundtrack, there are these long extended moments of silence where the dialogue normally would be, because that's not what we buy a soundtrack for. We buy a soundtrack for the music and the lyrics, but I think they were incorporated as well as possible. And you can definitely tell when some songs were recorded on stage compared to ones that were done in playback, like the big one where Maria and her roommate are singing back and forth in competition, sort of, over what Tony has done to Alberto. Why am I blanking on this one? Bernardo. Sorry, it's been that long since I've seen West Side Story, because theaters aren't open again. I can't go see it a third time.
There's not much I can do. I'm just a projectionist,
I know,
man.
I know. I'm not complaining to you. But yeah, I just like how the playback and the live recordings are seamlessly well put together without you even realizing it until they reveal, hey, we're going to mix in the dialogue and the music all together. It's done so well.
Yeah, West Side Story was the one I actually picked as a winner, because I know they're going to give some award to West Side Story. And I thought, if anything, they're going to give it basically for a technical achievement. Because I don't know if it wins the Best Picture, because I don't know if that many people saw it. I think people know of it, and they know that, like, that's pretty good, but not everyone saw West Side Story, because musicals are always really hard to hit with an audience. But the one thing people can agree on is, wow, the music sounds good and everything's mixed really well. Yeah, some musicals cannot be mixed really well. I think one of the worst examples, South Pacific, is one of the worst mixed musicals I've ever seen. It's also a really lazy musical, because every time anything cool is about to happen, they're like, hey, remember that cool action sequence during World War II? We're going to cut to romance, because no one wants to see the action sequence where they have to go on the island. Oh, look, they're on the island now. We skipped all the action. I don't know if it's a budget thing, but the music in there and the sound is
quite possible.
Yeah. But I had West Side Story for the winner. I also had sound mixing. I thought No Time to Die might get a nomination, but not a win. The Last Duel, historical epics commonly, or any of these big pieces, would get a nomination, because they have to mix in swords and talking and effects and such. But I think West Side Story is probably going to take it for sound mixing.
I have two more. The first one is the most obvious one that I'm going to go on and on about, and that is A Quiet Place Part 2, because they had to amp up the suspense and the horror elements while still sticking to the same rules that they established with the original movie. And John Krasinski had this great quote where, by sticking to the original rules, we found ways to improve upon the sound design and make it even more of a character than it was before. And what's interesting is that even in the first 10 minutes, they follow the exact same rules as they were during the alien attacks. if a character is framed within a wide shot, the sound is incredibly minimal, almost like you're that exact distance away from the character, compared to when they're in a close-up, the sound is dialed up a hell of a lot more. It has you paying laser focused attention to what's going on within each scene. You are anticipating something insane about to happen.
Yeah, I can testify to that, because that was the first movie we saw this year. We did a drive-in. And we went to see A Quiet Place.
Thing is,
if you were sleeping during that, you would just be woken up one of the close-up shots with this sound, the screaming, whatever it is. Maybe it was on the docks with the people who took her hearing aid and such. Like, just certain moments just really stood out sound-wise. Even the sound of the water and the docks and everything had a place. It was like the sound was its own character, and I appreciated that about the film.
And also, it kept the other original rule where every time a scene was told from Reagan's perspective, the sound would be completely drowned out entirely, which should be even scarier because, for all we know, she can't even feel the vibrations of something that might sneak up behind her.
Yeah, I think probably the best example of the sound design in this was with the baby, because they had the safe where they would put the baby in. And the way they used the crying and it echoed in the walls, the safe, or when the safe was closed for the 30 seconds or whatever with the oxygen tank, that was some crazy good sound design.
Oh, for sure. I kind of remember them opening and closing the box/crib a lot more, which that image alone is just so unsettling because you wish there was just another way for them to be able to do this. But of course, there isn't, because aliens just had to pick the wrong planet to crash land on.
Who do you think would win? The aliens from A Quiet Place or the aliens from Cloverfield? If they were head to head.
The aliens from Cloverfield are a lot bigger, aren't they?
They both invade Earth at the same time. Who wins?
I mean, the Cloverfield monster is like the size of skyscrapers, so I feel like
there's a lot of small Quiet Place monsters, and they're very sneaky, and they have stealth, and there's more of them.
Yeah, but also the Quiet Place aliens have the radar vision and the armored skin. I don't know if
it's a toss-up for me.
I don't know if the Cloverfield hatchlings can swim or not, because the movie establishes that these things can't.
Because they go to the island that's safe. They'd have to find a boat or something to go across.
Yeah, and that boat just unfortunately happened to drift upon.
Yeah, just a bit.
It happens.
Does that mean they're stuck on the island now?
Well, they killed the monster at the very end.
That's
and
true.
It was just the one, so no, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, it's not going to make up for how many people got killed, but...
Yeah, there's a few that died.
Yeah.
Oh, look, a safe place. It's not safe anymore.
Well, it was not safe for a solid half hour.
I mean, they did the same thing with Zombieland Double Tap this year, where they're like, oh no, we found a sanctuary, but it's not safe because the zombies got in.
And they had slightly better luck because it's a sequel.
Yeah, and it's more of a comedic zombie movie, so a lot more people lived.
You'll be the first to die, but I like your confidence. You might die. Thank you for your
I mean, it was okay. It was okay. What was your last one? What was the last one on your list there for sound design?
Well, you might find this hard to believe, but I actually like the sound design of Dune. All the complaints where it can be too loud in certain areas or quiet in the others, I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it adds to the surreal, hallucinogenic nature of Paul's perspective.
Yeah,
and I think that's a driving force to tell the story visually and through sound. And one of the behind-the-scenes features I saw just yesterday was that they actually recorded a lot of the sounds on set as opposed to doing it in post with Foley artists. The sand beams, they actually spent an hour or so recording that, and they realized that when the desert has a certain level of humidity, the beaches and the sand itself can actually make these groaning noises that sound like a humpback whale. And I just sat there and I'm like, really? I can't believe I didn't notice that before. And you can associate that with the sandworms in this universe in particular. And I don't know, like, obviously, when I get the Blu-ray for this, which will be probably a few days, depending on how fast Amazon is,
I'll be able to find out. I'm actually looking forward to the 4K on my new TV, so.
That's the one I got. It's 4K Blu-ray
Oh
and the
man,
digital copies.
we got to
So
watch that. We'll watch it together with the 4K and see what the picture quality is like, because that could be insane. It's going to be. Is it an
it will
IMAX
be
mix? Do you
insane.
know? Is it the IMAX?
That's a good
thing?
question. I didn't actually look that deep into it.
I got to look this up. You continue on the Dune train.
Well, there's not much else I can really say. I mean, every time I try to talk about sound design in movies, it's so hard because you can only think of one or two sentences to sum it up as detailed as possible. But when Paul is hallucinating the spice for the very first time and the sound just completely drowns out, except for the ancestral voices of the voice, and then all of a sudden the sound just goes boom as soon as Gurney lays his hand on Paul trying to snap him out of it. I thought that was such an effective moment and a prime example of how the sound design being so jarring actually serves the story and the emotional stakes within a given scene.
Well, I think that a lot of people like the sound design of Dune. I think as a person who knows this sort of thing, I notice this. But if you're an average moviegoer, it's sensationalized. It's meant to get you hyped and excited, and people like that. So
And it
for
worked.
the average person, they're like, "That's exciting."
I mean,
they don't notice that it got them excited, but it did.
I mean, during the Harkonnen invasion alone, even during those battles where because everyone's wearing the shields, you can't make out 100% who's winning the fight or not. The sounds of the shields being penetrated, the blades hitting everyone, and of course the music in particular, and just the sound of a spaceship being exploded and crash landing on the ground. It's just so palpable, and it actually elevated scenes on second and third viewing, like the ornithopter chase throughout the desert. Because first viewing, I didn't enjoy it as much, even though it was still decent in its own right. But the mechanics malfunctioning at the last minute with Paul trying to switch the gears and the ornithopter blades are faltering. The sounds alone just have you guessing, wait, what's happening? What's going on?
Well, I think the two or three sounds that stood out to me, all the sounds of normal things sounded very, very natural. The sound of the wind. If you've ever been walking on a windy day and you hear that wind, it sounds very, very real. All the sounds that happened were sounds that sounded natural in the environment. And I think how natural it sounded really add to creating this world. They took sounds from our world, whether it's wind or an engine malfunctioning, could be the simpleness of the opening of the door, which was very well done, and really sort of grounded in reality, because we can all relate to opening a door or the wind or this and that. And I think that's the charm of the design. I would have mixed the music a bit different, but I get they were going for a sensationalist to get you really excited at the end. And average moviegoers aren't going to know the difference. They're just having a great time. I'm just way too picky.
It makes me wish that more movies did that, where they recorded the sounds on set as opposed to just doing it in post. And that's another reason the sound design in Quiet Place is so good, because they recorded everything within that given moment. They told the crew to be as quiet as you possibly could. And just whatever they recorded, whatever it sounded like, they rolled with it. They found ways to adjust it so that it would fit the exact style that they were going for. And it's just a technique that more movies ought to do more often. I get that it's more time consuming, but you're making a movie already, so it's a little too late for that.
Okay, so I did look it up here. So it looks like the Dune 4K will not include the IMAX scenes. So that will be, I don't know where we're going to get that, but
the IMAX format anyways.
It's not going to include the IMAX ratio. It will have.
I can live with that.
I don't know. They did include one of the best 4Ks of the year was No Time to Die. No surprise, but it looked so good, regardless of what you think of the movie, because they included the IMAX sequences, and the IMAX sequences were stunning, absolutely stunning. So, who do you think win best sound design out of all the ones you picked there?
Well, I want Quiet Place 2 to win just because it was so well done that it is a character in and of itself. But because of the experience and the emotions that it gives you as you're watching, I do think Dune is going to win. Because as you put it, people really do like the sensationalized aspect of it. I mean, that's how Dunkirk beat Baby Driver. And Baby Driver's sound design was one of the most important elements to telling the story. That was an instant gimme. No, the fact that A Quiet Place 1 didn't even win for sound design at the Oscars, that
you got a nomination.
Still blows my mind to this day.
It's an honor just to be nominated.
Yeah, but nobody believes that anymore. In case you haven't noticed, based on all the outrage that comes.
I know,
with the
I know.
Oscar.
Yeah, it happens. Let's talk cinematography. This is probably one of my favorite categories. I love cinematography. One I want to mention off the bat, and I'm going to start with my winner. I don't think that this movie is going to get anything else. I know you think it might get some other nominations. I think that Chung Hong Chung for Last Night in Soho will get a win and get the nomination for best cinematography.
Really?
Based upon his use of color, his use of the camera as a character, the way it flows, the way it moves, as you described, the dancing sequences. It's one of the most visually pleasing trailers I've seen all year long. And as much as I love the Green Knight cinematography, I think Last Night in Soho just did a little bit better. You're disagreeing with me, aren't you?
No, I'm just laughing at the sounds in the background that you're trying so desperately to talk over.
I'm just talking, man. I also had Dune in here. I think that West Side Story, Bruno De Bello gets a nomination. Dan Leston from Nightmare Alley, I think he gets a nomination. He used that environment really, really well. And I think that Robert Yeoman from French Dispatch, because Wes Anderson is always visually pleasing. I think it goes to Soho because of the color palette for me is the most interesting I have seen all year. As much as I think the Green Knight probably deserves this, I don't think they get the nomination because for me, the Green Knight was incredible. I just think Last Night in Soho, they got to give Edgar Wright something because they always give him something for any of the awards. And I think that this is the award that they're going to give him for something.
I mean, here's the thing. I struggled with whether or not to put Last Night in Soho on my cinematography because Chan Chan-hun is a terrific cinematographer and he can make any American blockbuster look artistic. I mean, if you have seen It Chapter 1 and 2, the cinematography was outstanding. And the fact that he's Park Chan-wook's preferred cinematographer of all people, you can definitely see where that effort comes from. And you're right. When you see red, blue, and green all in neon within a given moment in Last Night in Soho, you know that shit is going to go down real hard. And there are some sequences within the foreground and the background where there's always something of visual interest and something of psychological tension that's being brought up, especially during the bedroom scene that's in all of the trailers and all the promos that I rewatched my review of that for the last time, and I couldn't believe that I was that excited talking about the movie and the fact that my arms were shaking throughout that entire sequence when I was in the theater. I will never forget that experience. And it is probably Edgar Wright's most impressive when it comes to the cinematography because he usually features a lot of quick cutting and whip pans, and he still does, but his more longer, drawn out stylistic traits are unbelievably impressive, which is why it disappoints me that I didn't actually put it in there because I didn't think it had that big of a chance of winning.
Well, what do you got? I mean, I thought Last Night in Soho was the most impressive on this list. And I think no one's talking about it. And Edgar Wright's got to win something.
That's the other thing that disappoints me, that nobody really is talking about it. But I do have the more obvious choices like Robert Yeoman with the French Dispatch because he has to juggle a lot of different aspect ratios, a lot of different colors or lack thereof, even with animation and having to make that look impressive, which isn't really his forte.
Well, see, that's why I think he gets a nomination because it mixes the animation, it mixes the black and white, and then it mixes like the 70s, 80s, like late 60s sort of opaque palette of color. And I think that itself, mixing everything, gets nominated, but doesn't win.
No, I don't think it'll win, but it still was really well done. The tragedy of Macbeth's cinematography was phenomenal in making it feel like this could have been a movie made in the 40s, not just because it's black and white, not just because it has the 4:3 ratio, but because the visual style is more up to par with a Fritz Lang movie with the amount of shadows and fog that is in every frame and surrounds each character to make them look incredibly morally ambiguous or untrustworthy in and of itself. The Lady Macbeth sequences where she's walking in and out of the light, where her entire body is a shadow in and of itself, makes her out to be so goddamn sinister compared to Denzel, who's usually like shrouded in half and half because the side of him does feel guilty, but that guilty side is for lack of a better term, overshadowed by the amount of power that he has, power that he doesn't want to give up anytime soon.
Well, see,
so I feel like there's more of a thematic reason for the cinematography.
See, I'm looking at Macbeth, and the tragedy of Macbeth, I think, wins production design, because production design incorporates lights, camera, and everything. If we're talking black and white, I think that Come On did a better use of black and white with its character to tell the story than Macbeth.
Really?
Because it was a simple story. They told it in black and white as if it's a memory. That's what they're trying to tell you. With Macbeth, it's lighting, it's fixtures, it's sets, it's the culmination of everything coming together to make Macbeth
right, but
look
sometimes
good.
The cinematographer has to be in charge of the lighting in order to get the shot that he wants.
Yeah,
so I feel like that
just
level of responsibility.
I wanted to nominate it, but I just don't know. I just don't know. I can see why people would nominate it.
Yeah.
But I just don't know if it gets one for that. Because a lot of these bigger movies, and there's so many black and white movies this year, it's like everyone is making a black and white movie. And I like that. I just think a lot of people are overlooking black and white movies. So if it gets a nomination, that's fantastic, but I don't know if it will.
I'm hoping anyways, because every review that I've seen can't go 1 minute without talking about it. This one, I'm not sure if this has a chance, but I'm really crossing my fingers that West Side Story gets one for cinematography, because there are all those video essays about how Spielberg manages to do an unbroken long take in a short amount of time, where you don't even realize that it's a long take because it's multiple shots broken down in a single take. And I talk about that with half the directors of these movies. I talked about it with John Krasinski with Quiet Place. I talked about it with Celine Sciamma for Petite Maman, but dude is absolutely the master of the staging and incorporating the frames. And for having to do longer takes of actors singing and dancing on these real life sets where they have to hit their marks at just the right moment, particularly the dance in the gym, where it's a 2-minute unbroken take of people walking into the gym, and then it pans over to see every performer within that scene execute these perfect twists, turns, and lifting their partners in the air. And there's so much planning, and there's so much effort that has to be put into it. And Janusz Kaminski, who has worked with Spielberg before, is an amazing cinematographer. I can't remember for sure, but I think he's the one who got the cinematography win for Saving Private Ryan. And it's so refreshing to see him do a movie that's more pristine and clean, even though there still has this modern sense of grit to how violent the story can get.
I mean, I think West Side Story is a shoe-in for production design. One of the things we're not going to talk, not production design, costume design.
It'll get
for
there
sure.
For
I didn't really do too much on costume design. I know we didn't put it on our list, but I think that West Side Story could easily take this.
There's some obvious ones for costume design. I mean, West Side Story, Isa, Tammy Faye,
Spencer,
Cruella. Because
Cruella
had to be really creative with
it was House of Gucci could easily take costume design because it's all about fashion. Like that's a thing. I actually have House of Gucci here a little bit on the list. So who's your winner? Who's your picking for cinematography here?
Well, it's either, I narrowed it down to two. It's either Greg Fraser for Dune, because he has to create this David Lean massive style of scope. And to me, it goes without saying, that to me is like the big draw to this movie, just how large scale it can look and how it can serve the mythology of the story, the emotional stakes that these characters are going through, where at the beginning they were top of the galaxy and then they're like the size of ants in comparison as they're completely on their own in the desert. So I feel like the size is more thematically...
Dune does have that scale, because you can see how they look so small when they first enter the planet, and the way they look in this massive palace, they look like they don't belong there.
Even the Harkonnen army, where they're all tiny ants compared to their spaceships, they're all tiny ants compared to Dave Bautista as the one who's leading.
Freaking love Dave Bautista. He is so good in Dan. I just want to go off on a tangent here. I love Dave Bautista in Del Villeneuve movies. He is so good in Blade Runner 2049. He is amazing for the little screen time he has in Dune. Every time he does one of these movies, people are like, he's a good actor. That, I mean, even with James Gunn, like he doesn't even get the story beats right. Not that James Gunn is a bad director by any means. I just don't think they click as well as these two do together. And even in Army of the Dead, which we talked about, Dave Bautista was the standout star. That was his movie. Despite what you think of it, despite what we think of it, I know we've ranted forever on it. But there's just not that chemistry between actor and director. And for some reason, Denis Villeneuve, he just brings out the best in every actor. He brings out the best in Timothée Chalamet. I dare say he's better than in Call Me by Your Name. I mean, he's not bad in Call Me by Your Name by any means. But I think he was better as supporting in Lady Bird. I think it's all about the actor dynamic. And Rebecca Ferguson gives one of the best performances of her life, which we'll talk about. She helps carry the second half of that movie. And I think that is the actor director chemistry, the way they work together, the attitude they have on set, whatever it is, he's doing it right. Like Dave Bautista is a good actor in this. Oscar Isaac, I could give two shits about. This man's okay. There's nothing wrong with him. He was fine in The Card Counter. It was all right, with Paul Schroeder that people seem to love. But in Dune, like he's really, really, really good. And in Star Wars, even J.J. Abrams can't bring a performance out of him like that. I rewatched The Last Jedi in 4K and he's good. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with his performance. But Denis Villeneuve is one of the best directors you can work with because he brings out the best in all his people on screen. And it's incredible. I mean, even the one thing, the reason I pinpoint this specific reason, the guy who played the giant over fat blob thing who got murdered halfway
Stellan
through.
Skarsgård.
That could have been the dumbest thing on the planet. But because of his commitment and the actor-director relationship, it worked. Like, that's a weird, gross thing I hate. But he made that work. He directed it. And that could have been a really stupid, silly moment. It could have been like a Fast 9, oh, Han is back sort of thing, or one of those moments where you're like, oh, it's okay. But that was a good moment regardless. But Villeneuve works with his actors exceptionally well. I mean, you can see it all the way back to the beginning of his career with Prisoners and such. He just knows how to get a performance. He got probably one of the best Hugh Jackman performances ever. And Hugh Jackman did some really shitty Wolverine movies, and I still had fun with them. And he did some other things here and there. And even Les Mis, you didn't get a performance that good, but you put him with Villeneuve and you like, boom, click. He's an actor's director. Anyway, continue. That's my little rant for the day.
No, that's good. And if we're keeping on the Bautista train, he gets a lot of comparisons to other wrestlers turned actors, especially when it comes to Dwayne Johnson. But I would argue that even though Dwayne Johnson is technically more talented of an actor, Bautista is making considerably better career choices. Yes. And he's trying to go for being more versatile. Because even when you look at his other Denis Villeneuve movies, you have Blade Runner 2049, where he is seemingly an average guy who turns out to be a replicant with severe rage issues and no way to control his strength, compared to Dune, where he is technically the most basic dipshit henchman that you could come up with. And even though he's still pretty over the top, he manages to kind of establish a motivation where, because of how stupid he is, he legitimately believes that his family is doing the right thing. They believe that they have earned the spice from Arrakis. And when it flies by his head that they gave it to the Atreides family just to usurp them, he suddenly gets a little bit more invested. But of course, there's that scene where he's circling around the other prisoners. He's looking for Josh Brolin because he gave Brolin the scar on his face, but he can't find the one enemy he's looking for and takes it out on the other prisoners by just hacking them up. Like, there are layers that will hopefully get expanded upon in part 2. And Bautista is one of those actors who says, like, I was approached to do part 1 on the basis that if it was that good, part 2 will happen without question. Like, he got approached that way. Javier Bardem got approached that way. Obviously, Zendaya.
Yeah, that's one of my biggest problems with Dune is I don't know if we need Zendaya outside of the dream sequences, and like Javier Bardem just sort of exists. I think I would have liked to save that part for part 2 and maybe just keep them in the dream sequences. I would have liked to end on that giant sandworm. But Dave Bautista, I would compare to Rowdy Roddy Piper. I don't know if you've ever, because he did some genuinely good performances. But then he also did some really lame ones. They Live is that one. And I think that's going to be the Blade Runner 2049 of Dave Bautista's career. But then he's got he's got the Hell Comes to Frogtown with Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which is fun, but not amazing at the end of the day. But I mean, Josh Brolin in Dune, he just works really well. I mean, from Sicario to Dune, like, people want to work with this man. If you can get on I think this is, I'm going to say right now, I think that Denis Villeneuve picks his projects very well. He takes his time. He doesn't rush it. And when something comes out, he actually puts the time and the effort in. And I think it's like 70s Spielberg. I think it's going to be that sort of vibe, because Spielberg now is, and a West Side Story, I got no problem with. I was watched some clips in anticipation for the show, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to enjoy it. I just didn't get a chance to see it in theaters.
I can see you liking it.
Yeah. But Spielberg wraps things up. Everything's got to be tied off with a little pretty bow. If you accidentally pet a dog wrong, you have to be friends with the dog at the end of the movie. I mean, Ready Player One is the biggest example. Like, everyone's got to be, everything's wrapped up with a bow. And Paul Verhoeven has to be too violent, and everyone has their gimmicks, but I think Villeneuve doesn't have a gimmick yet. I think he's genuinely trying to make great movies, and I think he is that Spielberg level of 70s filmmaker that we all respect.
Well, there's one thing about Villeneuve that I realized, like, there aren't that many cliche techniques or themes that you could pinpoint to him to, except for one. There's always a focus on a parent-child relationship in each of his movies, right down to his very first movie, August 32nd on Mars, where it's about a couple trying to have a child. And then his second movie, Maelstrom, this one woman killed a guy and then falls in love with the son of the guy she ended up killing, and so
you recommended
on and so
that movie.
forth.
I got to see it. It looks really good.
Maelstrom was decent. It's not one of my favorites of his, but
I mean,
and then you have
Ensandi.
I mean, Ensandi is about kids learning about their mom. Polytechnique, you see a parent's reaction to their kids getting killed within that incident, and so on and so forth. Even with Dune, the big core of the movie is the relationship between Paul and Lady Jessica.
But that's what makes his movies work. His movies are human. He's relating it back to human emotion that, regardless of the situation, you can always relate. I guess he does have this. You can still tie that
to Spielberg, because Spielberg always has the son-father dynamic that was so emotionally resonant.
That's true. But yeah, I don't know. I Denis Villeneuve, I'm loving more than Spielberg. Past 1990.
Oh, 100%.
After Jurassic Park, it's all about other directors. 100%.
That's true.
Let's jump over to foreign film. Foreign picture. Who are your nominations? I had trouble with this one, man.
Yeah, I had to remind myself how many foreign films I saw this year, because, again, due to obvious reasons, the only way I could see that many foreign films was at the film festival this year.
Yeah.
And most of these I saw through TIFF. This one from Japan, an anime called Inuo, which is basically, I'm not kidding, if A Knight's Tale was an anime, because this is a rock opera surreal musical where they have to use the technology of feudal Japan to create these Queen-style concerts, and it is unbelievably awesome.
What's this?
But there is depth.
I want to see this. What's this called? I'm going to write this down.
It's called Inuo. So INU.
INUO.
And then put an apostrophe.
Okay.
And then just O, like OH.
Watch. That sounds really interesting. I love Queen.
But there's still some depth. There's still some depth about outsider culture, freedom of expression when it comes to what you express in your work and your art, the threats of censorship that come from people who are offended, threatened by the information, or just flat out disagree. There are actual layers to this. So that's my first one from Japan. From France, I have Petite Maman, which comes to us from the director of Portrait of a Lady on Fire.
Yeah, you mentioned
it's obviously not as big in scope or in the emotional themes of it, but I don't see why anyone was really expecting it to be. Like, when Chris Stuckman put it in his honorable mentions, it's just like, not as good as Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And I just went, no shit, was it supposed to be though? But at the same time, it has a terrific coming-of-age story that plays out more as this lighthearted mystery drama in the vein of When Marnie Was There. It does have a similar character dynamic and a couple similar twists, but it also has what makes Celine Sciamma such a great filmmaker. All of her shots are so well composed, they may as well be portraits in and of themselves. The lack of music and emphasis on sound design, which really makes me wish I'd considered Petite Maman for sound design, because it's so minimal, but when you hear when you hear these two kids wandering through the woods and they're stepping on all of these rocks and sticks, it makes you feel like you're actually within the location along with them.
Yeah, I got I'm the one there's, again, a lot of these are ones I want to see that I'm trying to actively locate, but it's very difficult. Worst Person in the World. We started playing the trailer at work. It looks like a very interesting sort of character study about a person who doesn't quite know what they want in life. And that's the I believe it's Swedish film, right?
I think it's Norwegian.
Yeah, Drive My Car is one I desperately want to see, but I cannot find this movie anywhere. I really want to see this movie so bad. Looks like a slice of life. Two that I really think should get nominated that I really want to highlight is Let's Talk Lamb. Lamb is freaking weird.
Lamb's on my list too.
Lamb is crazy cool cinematography wise, very simple stripped down story, great sound design. It has one of the weirdest reveals of the year, the way it photographs the main protagonist of the story. And I don't want to spoil Lamb here. The way it shows the kid throughout the film, the way you can see the kid growing up, and then the way it reveals it at the end is like, wow, the way they shot that was so effective, but it could have been bad. It could have been really bad. It could have failed to get through there. But Lamb is crazy. And the ending there, the way they use the hills as sort of a distant landscape, and just the use of lighting in the windows there is really, really good. There's not a ton of dialogue. It's a very simple film, and it's the weirdest film I have seen all year. What does it mean? I have some theories, but I overthought this film heavily with Lamb. My theory was that the woman, and I'm going to throw a few theories out there. I think that the woman had a miscarriage. So this is sort of like her dream of what she wants to do with the obvious relations to it. So at the end, when the ending takes place, it's basically her reliving that moment, and it drove her away from her husband. Hence the third act twist there.
And with
that's my thought anyway.
Well, with that, I think the theme of refusing to accept one's past is pretty prevalent, especially when you compare the lamb in this movie to the supposed miscarriage that this woman had, or maybe it was even stillborn, because they kind of imply that they had the kid at one point in time. And then you also have the stuff where she has to settle an old dispute between her and her brother-in-law, because the two of them have had a complicated history that they're trying to resolve within and of itself, where that can get accomplished, but you can't overlook the fact that you have lost something that you can't replace. And the fact that they try to replace their kid with this lamb in ways that, again, we don't want to spoil, but the great thing about that reveal that you were talking about is that the movie knows that we're anticipating the reveal. So they keep teasing it by never fully showing the lamb, just covering it with a blanket. Yep. The head is the only thing that sticks out, and you're just sitting there going, come on, can we just see the lamb already?
Yeah, this is the one movie that I don't want to spoil it for anyone, because I think you have to go in and just experience this.
One thing to keep in mind for anyone who hasn't seen it, this is not a horror movie. It's not a creature feature. It's a drama. Thriller. It's a drama in the vein of Yorgos Lanthimos, and I would argue that if Yorgos Lanthimos was a good director, this would be yet another example of that.
Yeah.
Because it has the surrealist nature. It's incredibly isolated, but what sets it apart from something like Killing of a Sacred Deer is that it's pretty self-aware of how stupid and fucked up it is, to the point where the brother-in-law, when he sees the lamb, goes, what the fuck is this? And the brother is just like, don't ruin this for us, man. And it's just like, okay, the movie knows that it's insane. Yeah. The people know that they're making a stupid decision, but they're going along with it. Like, that's good writing.
Yeah. The other one I want to highlight, rom-com. Putting a rom-com on this list. I'm Your Man. Dan Stevens. He played basically this woman who works in a research facility, lives with this robot that's literally made to please her every need for 2 weeks. It's a 2-week thing. And this robot is so efficient. It like cleans up her house, but she complains she likes it messy. And he tries to make her favorite foods. And everything that he does to try to make her happy makes her more unhappy because she doesn't know what she wants in life. And it's a really simple character piece that has romantic elements, of course. Dan Stevens is excellent. The poster, I'm Your Man, with a little power button for your, is really clever. And I honestly think this is one of the sweetest, kindest movies all year long. And it also comments, it's a social commentary, really, at the end of the day. It's like, how do you date someone? What do you want when you're dating? If you find what you're looking for, are you going to be happy with it? Do you need to be at a certain place in life? It really comments on the society where everyone wants to be in a relationship, but they don't know how. And I think this movie perfectly exemplifies that. And it's a really, really sweet movie. And I think people should check it out because it's very enjoyable. It's not crazy long. And it leaves you with a smile on your face because of the way it tackles all these issues. And it also, one of the things it does, it tackles like the dating stuff and the relationship, but it also tackles, how do you be an independent woman in a relationship with a man at the end of the day? Like, how do you sort of separate yourself from that and be your 21st century feminist? Because that's one part of the character's bits there, that they lie on the undertones. And this movie does a really good job of balancing all of that while creating relatable characters we like. And it's fun, it's quirky, it's got some comedy, and it's very accessible in any language because it's not crazy dialogue heavy. It is reliant on some dialogue. Yes, of course, all movies are, but it's reliant on the visuals and their facial reactions. And it's a beautiful, beautiful movie. But my winner, I think Parallel Mothers. This is one I really want to see. Penelope Cruz. It's getting a ton of chatter. It's the one movie that I can't find to watch, and I want to watch it. But Parallel Mothers, Penelope Cruz, it's from the director of Pride and Glory, which was a really big one a few years back, which got a nomination. And it just looks like a really, really, the poster is one of the coolest things of the year. Did you see the poster, Tyler?
I have seen the poster, and I like the design of the woman that Cruz is hugging.
Yeah, I think this movie wins Best Foreign Film. It's got that sort of Fantastic Woman vibe. It's got that Shoplifters. It's got that. It looks like it has emotional storytelling with some great performances, and it looks like the poster's really, really neat. It looks like the trailer's really, really great, and it's got some good people behind it. And there's a lot of great reviews online. And again, this is things I want to see because I've seen I'm Your Man and I've seen Lamb. But the rest of them are very difficult to locate. Foreign films are not something. And I think that's something that we need to really take into account. As much as we love streaming, and streaming's great, I love to be able to stream and watch a show with the wife or put on any of these things. Like, as much as I'm going to love Cobra Kai season 4, I think it's going to be great. But I think there is something to be said for a physical theater release because we need a place to go and see the smaller movies. And whether it's The Princess or whether you're going anywhere else, we need the small movies and we need them on the screen. They get maybe a 3 or 4 day run and people just don't see them. And the Cineplexes, they're never going to highlight them. The Landmark are never going to highlight them. They'll pick this up for 4 days. It bombs and they drop it. And who's going to go to the Cineplex to see I'm Your Man or Drive My Car or something? I mean, I would love to, but I wish there were more places to see the smaller foreign films because they're great. And the one you were mentioning from China there with The Projectionist, that's a movie I've not been able to locate either. And I didn't put it on my list because I don't know that much about it besides what you said. And I think that's a movie that I think would play really, really well. You said a Cinema Paradiso, but set in a different time period.
Yeah, and that's kind of the reason 1 Second would win Best Foreign Film for me, just because it takes the most mundane aspects of life and makes them as large scale and cinematic as you can possibly get. The opening few minutes has our main character walking through a desert, but it's shot in a Lawrence of Arabia style where he looks like a tiny ant in comparison to this huge environment that is clearly not home to him, but he's trying to desperately go from one place to another. And there's one moment where 2 kids sneak up in front and behind him to try and mug him. And it's shot in a Sergio Leone style where you get cutaways of one of them flipping out a knife, and then it cuts back and forth between all of them being stared down. And I don't want to spoil what the ending is, but the ending is kind of a bait and switch where the resolution is a lot quicker than you would anticipate, but it comes out of nowhere and it was hilarious. It was such a subversion, and that's the great thing about this movie. As mundane and as big of a slice of life as it is, it always finds a way to subvert your expectations. If there's a cliched love-hate relationship between an adult and an orphan kid,
Yeah.
they find ways to switch the dynamic around so that one character can go from being the unlikable one to the more sympathetic and vice versa. That was a great relationship. And as I said, Fan Wei as Mr. Movie was absolutely terrific in such a simplistic way. And that's the great thing about this movie. It knows how to be simplistic, but still incredibly emotional. The first opening 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes are done completely without dialogue. Just having the characters look at something, it'll cut away to what they're looking at and then cut right back to their reaction. And sometimes it's just all you need with a movie like this.
Yeah, I think foreign film is going to be one of those where we just can't locate most of these, and that's the problem. You're going 1 second. I'm going to take Parallel Mothers because there's just a bunch I want to see. Animated feature. This one's not going to be a long one because I know that these are what I think is going to be nominated. So we got to think Disney can only get 2 nominations max, right?
Right.
So we got to think what's on here. I'm picking Raya and the Last Dragon as my winner. I love this movie. I know Encanto is probably going to get a nomination. Luca is Pixar. I think that gets nominated. So then we got to think, what are the other ones? Because in previous years, we got like Boss Baby. So I'm thinking Sing 2 gets a nomination, and DreamWorks Spirit Untamed, as bad as those movies were, or, respective, there's not a lot of great animated features out there. There's going to be some sort of 4-in-1 stuck in there. Like, I'll watch Sing 2. Sing 1 was cute. Like, it's basically like what if American Idol or The Voice was a cute little movie with singing pigs and Kelly Clarkson, and it's cute, nothing wrong with it. And Spirit Untamed, I'm sure there's the fans of someone who's going to grow up with that. I mean, there were those movies we grew up with that were animated that didn't blow our minds, but we're like, Hoodwink still holds a special place in my heart, as terrifying as it looks, because that was a movie I grew up with. Hoodwink 2 got an Oscar nomination just because there wasn't a lot in that year. What do you think Oscar wise?
Well, that's the thing. I haven't seen that many animated movies this year just because the ones that were being advertised I thought were fucking stupid. And the fact that some of them are like on best of the year lists, I find so mind-blowing. I can't believe that many people liked The Mitchells versus the Machines, which I think is going to be Netflix's... Really? Oh, okay. Yeah. People loved Mitchells versus the Machines. I don't know why.
I think it exists.
I thought it looked pretty dumb and basic, other than the fact that the teenage girl is a lesbian, but they never pointed out all that much. She just wears... I've seen
Meet the Robinsons. I'm okay.
You know what? Meet the Robinsons wasn't even as good as people made it out to be. But here's the thing:
mediocre.
If we're going by what movie from which studio, I would pick Luca from Pixar. Mm-hmm. I've heard more glowing things about Encanto than I have Raya and the Last Dragon. In fact,
Raya.
I forgot that Raya even existed, if I'm being completely honest.
It's so good, man.
I'm sure it is. Good. I'm sure it is. I can't remember what it was that turned me off from it. Maybe it was Awkwafina, because I'm still pretty hit and miss when it comes to her.
I love Awkwafina. She's so cool.
I do think Netflix is going to get in with Mitchells versus the Machines, just because they're getting bigger with the animation department, and they've had a couple of nominations like Klaus, and I think Over the Moon got nominated last year.
But Klaus and Over the Moon were artistic and interesting and unique, and Mitchells versus the Machine was great. And Mitchells versus the Machine is pretty standard fair animation, pretty much like a DreamWorks knockoff.
I don't know what it is. Speaking of DreamWorks, I think their entry might be Ron's Gone Wrong, because that actually
the snowman one?
No, not that one.
Ron's Gone Wrong has a snowman on it, right?
Ron's Gone Wrong is this robot that is basically it's basically a Baymax knockoff.
Oh, I thought it was a snowman. It looks like a snowman. Okay. Continue.
I can't even remember what I said. What you just said was
a robot Baymax knockoff. I mean, it looks cute.
Yeah, it does. And it's the main kid is played by Jack Dylan Grazer, who was Alberto and Luca. So, love the fact that he's getting into more voice acting. He's definitely talented enough to do so. And if I were to pick a fifth one, which would be really tough because I don't know how many other animation departments out there, I don't want to say Boss Baby
Clifford
2,
the
but
Big Red Dog might get a nomination.
oh, fuck off. That doesn't count. I do think Boss Baby 2 has potential for one specific reason, and that is the first one got nominated, and it still blows my mind to this day. That is one of the weirdest and worst Oscar choices I've ever heard of in my life.
Who is even in Boss Baby? Is that Alec Baldwin?
Yeah, that's Alec Baldwin.
Yeah, I don't think it gets a nomination strictly because they don't want bad press. Alec Baldwin had that shooting incident.
Yeah, but I mean, he's not the only one in the movie, though. I get that doesn't make
Jimmy
it instantly
Kimmel's in this movie. Don't nominate Jimmy Kimmel, please. I mean, he is one of the better talk shows on
the
TV.
The first movie was nominated the year he hosted the Oscars. A little bit of a coincidence there, huh?
Okay. Lisa Kudrow, Steve Buscemi. Okay. I mean,
wait, what?
Tobey Maguire. That's the cast.
For the first one, yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's weird. But yeah, I don't know. Animation's a toss-up. You think Encanto is going to take it, right?
Based on how glowing the reviews have gotten for this one, which I mean, I've only seen the trailers. It looked okay, but I didn't think the story or the characters were anything all that special. I mean, if it were up to me, I would pick Luca just because it was just such a wonderful movie. I could watch Luca and Alberto talk to each other forever. Those two and their chemistry just made the movie for me. The setting and the environment where everything looked so gorgeous, and the way they paid tribute to Hayao Miyazaki movies was outstanding. I mean, the town they go to in Italy is literally called Porto Rosso. And if you can get the reference, you should be proud of yourself, folks.
I don't know that many Miyazaki movies. I know
it's
a little bit.
Porto Rosso is just a play on words with Porco Rosso.
Yeah. So let's talk screenplay.
Okay.
So I think the screenplays here, best original, best whatever, we're just sort of combining the screenplays into one. I think that The French Dispatch straight up gets a nomination because that's an original Wes Anderson. I think that we see Edgar Wright, because he's traditionally with Last Night in Soho get a nomination for best screenplay because he's got a lot of screenplay nominations for many, many things. Adam McKay's Don't Look Up. He's always got a screenplay nomination. The Big Short was one of those for sure. I think that then we see The Green Knight in here because that's an adaptation of a 15th century poem. That's my pick winner because I think that's what they're going to give The Green Knight. And then I think Belfast, because Belfast is going to be nominated for a lot of things. They're just going to sort of put it in screenplay because that's one of the big ones. What are your thoughts on screenplay here?
Okay, so I do have a list of original and adapted, but you could summarize in one or two sentences what's great about each of these screenplays. So I'll just go through them as quickly as I can. For best original screenplay, I have Pig because it's a revenge thriller that flips the formula upside down. It isn't about submitting to violent interactions in order to get what you want. If anything, it's going for the more pacifist route of trying to reach out to the people you can't stand in life and try to find common ground so that there won't be any more conflict and you can take back what was yours to begin with. I really like that subversion. French Dispatch as an anthology is probably one of, if not the most consistent anthologies I have ever seen, which is really saying a lot. And Wes Anderson has an extreme amount of good luck when it comes to original screenplays because he's got Royal Tenenbaums, Moonrise, Grand Budapest. I'd be blown away if he didn't get any nominations for this.
Yeah, I think he gets it.
Belfast, just because, as we've pointed out over and over again, it has the Oscar bait checklist, but it does so in a way that respects the audience and focuses more on the emotions of what it was like to live through the Troubles as opposed to like getting down to the nitty gritty. I know a lot of people wanted to learn more about the conflict, or to summarize, it was more than just a Catholic Protestant debate, but I mean, that's besides the point. And for a lot of the citizens who experienced the most amount of hardships, the political side of it didn't matter. What mattered to them was making it out alive and just having as normal of a life as they could possibly get. My last one is interesting. Licorice Pizza. Paul Thomas Anderson has a lot of luck when it comes to screenplays and getting a Best Direction nomination. And what was so good about Licorice Pizza was that it knew how to be a hangout movie, and it knew how to have like a specific style of dialogue that still felt incredibly realistic.
Mhm.
Cooper Hoffman, Alana Haim, Bradley Cooper, Sean Penn, Tom Waits, they're all given terrific dialogue that is stylized a little bit over the top, but it still feels unique to the world that they're creating. And that's the great thing about Paul Thomas Anderson. He can create worlds that feel authentic, but through certain dialects of different characters who have different lifestyles, it feels, it's hard to describe really, but
Yeah, licorice pizza is going to show up later in the list here because we got 5 categories left. So
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think screenplay is going to be interesting. Adam McKay is definitely a shoe-in. French Dispatch. I didn't really think about licorice pizza, but Paul Thomas Anderson is probably going to make it in there.
And for adapted scripts, I had Tragedy and Macbeth because that just seems like a ridiculously easy one. West Side Story because it has to take what was good about the original movie while also integrating what was better in the play. They rearranged certain songs, they added in some character elements, like changing the one character of Doc into Doc's widow, played by Rita Moreno, because Moreno got her Oscar for the original movie, so it's fitting that you have her back, and she's still as great as always. And it also has to keep what made the original smart when it comes to addressing prejudice and hate. Some people I've talked to wish that this movie was more progressive in its handling of race, and I just sat there and I went, well, there are so many movies nowadays that have the progressive view of race, and what I like about West Side Story as a play and as a movie is that everyone is capable of and does perpetuate hate and prejudice, whether they were the ones who started it or whether they're retaliating. Regardless, what they do is wrong, and they face the consequences for it, no matter how hard they try to either look past it or try to redeem themselves.
So let's jump into Best Supporting Actress. Who you got?
For Best Supporting Actress, I have Judi Dench from Belfast.
I've got that one.
Ariana DeBose from West Side Story.
Okay. I have Rita Moreno from West Side Story.
Okay.
Because she won before. I think she's going to be nominated again as a legacy award, so to speak. I think she's going to win it with West Side Story. I think this is going to be West Side Story's only win.
I don't know about that, but continuing on. Vera Farmiga for The Many Saints of Newark, and this is just a personal one for me.
No, I was looking at that one. That was one that popped up on a lot of people's lists of the year. So
did it really?
Yeah, popped up on a couple of those.
I haven't met that many people who like the movie as much as I do, but
I mean, there's some fans of it definitely on the internet somewhere. But people definitely talk about that one.
Aunjanue Wallace from King Richard.
Okay, yeah.
And my ultimate winner, you saw this coming anyways, Rebecca Ferguson from Dune.
I also have Rebecca Ferguson from Dune. As we previously discussed Dune and her relationship with her kid. I actually have a couple different ones here. So I have Judi Dench from Belfast, Rita Moreno from West Side Story, Rebecca Ferguson from Dune, Alicia Vikander from The Green Knight. I think she did a really, really good job in this movie.
I was debating whether or not to put that on here.
Because she was super pivotal to it, and Alicia Vikander is like sort of a shoe-in for Oscars because she got a nomination for The Theory of Everything, and she got a nomination for Best Foreign Film for the one with the robot. My goodness, Ex Machina. And
she won for that one with Eddie
the Danish girl, I believe she won for. So then my last one here, Toni Collette for Nightmare Alley, because I think people are really overlooking Nightmare Alley. I think it's going to get a lot of awards. It's always that one that no one sees, and they're like, hey, we like that one. I think that might be an awards darling here. But Toni Collette, regardless, deserves an Oscar, because she was so good in Hereditary, and if they had allowed horror movies, she would have won.
She definitely would have gotten nominated, and there were moments where I felt she was a little too over the top, but for the most part, it was as balanced as you could possibly get.
I don't think we're missing anyone too much. This was actually one of the tougher categories for me to do, so...
It was a little easier for me to narrow down. I almost put Vikander on there because portraying two characters is inherently a tough challenge. especially if you've done scenes with the other actors as one character, and then you have to completely switch around and go from the sweet girlfriend to this sadistic creep who you have no idea what exactly she wants out of Garwin.
I think that Alicia Vikander is one of the best working indie actresses right now that people aren't really giving enough attention, because she does really good in everything she's given, whether it's weird or odd or unique. I'd like to see her in an action franchise. I think she'd be a great lead for like a Marvel something, because I think she would bring a lot to the role.
She did the Tomb Raider reboot.
It was okay. The biggest problem with that movie was the story. They just sort of ripped the two games and shoved it together.
Yeah, but it's a video game movie. The story's always the problem.
I mean, if they had stuck to one of the video games, it would have been stronger, but they tried to take the twist from part 2 and mix it with the story from part 1, then take out the fantastic elements what made the first game work, and then they really sort of trimmed the fat and just sort of combined. If they had really just stuck to one, I think it would work better. I think Tomb Raider worked better as like a TV series, and you could do a whole game through and through that, but I don't know if people would sit through a Tomb Raider TV series. I mean, Terra Nova with dinosaurs didn't even do that well after one season, even though it's not that bad. So we got director, picture, and best actress. Let's do director. Who would you pick for best director?
Okay, so for best director, I would pick Zhang Yimou for 1 Second. Wes Anderson for The French Dispatch.
I also have him.
Steven Spielberg for West Side Story.
Fair.
David Lowery for The Green Knight. And Denis Villeneuve.
I actually have a very different list from you. I only have 2 of the same ones. I totally agree with Wes Anderson for French Dispatch. It's very much it's his name. Has he ever won for best director?
I don't know if he's ever even been nominated.
I feel like at this point, I picked French Dispatch for best director. This is his year. I think the Academy owes him an Oscar for directing so many crazy cool movies. You know, I mean, he's come up with opposition in the back. I think Kenneth Branagh for Belfast would get a nomination. I think that people really like him. They like Kenneth Branagh. They like what he's doing. And I think there's an audience for that. And they're like, yeah, Belfast. I've got Denis for Dune, because I think he did a really good job in directing that. Like we discussed the actor relationship there. I've got Paul Thomas Anderson for Licorice Pizza, because at the end of the day, he's a director. Yeah. And I think this is where they will give him that nomination. Whether I think Licorice Pizza will win, it would be cool if it did. I think it's a very good slice of life story. And then I've got, because this is something the Academy always done, and you're going to be like, of course you did, Josh. Of course you did. There are not a lot of female directed movies this year. I was looking for a couple and nothing major. So I think they're going to give a nod to Joanna, who did Souvenir Part 2. Because there's not that many female directors directing this year. Like there's a lot of small indie stuff, which I'm sure is wonderful, but on the big scale and on the big charts, things people are looking at, you got Souvenir Part 2. So I think they'll throw the nod in, but I think ultimately they're about to get into Wes Anderson.
You think so?
I really, I'm going with my heart on this one. French Dispatch, Wes Anderson needs a best director Oscar. He's quirky. He's fun. He's literally the epitome of the Academy, and they've never given him a thing.
Look, I agree with that, but I feel like his chances of winning a screenplay Oscar are a lot better than getting a director one. Don't get me wrong. I still want him to win some. But I mean, I feel like Villeneuve has been deserving of this for a while, because it was a miracle for him to finally get nominated for Arrival, which
that's fair,
showcases a lot of the strengths that he would carry on with Blade Runner 2049, which he also got.
Yeah.
And I feel like with this, because of what a crowning achievement he was able to do, I feel like that might appeal to the Academy members a hell of a lot more, because it does evoke the old-fashioned style that used to be very common in awards history, especially with David Lean, who was no doubt an inspiration when it came to the overall visual look of the film.
We'll see. I think it's going to go to French Dispatch. All right. So, best actress. I'll start this one off. I have Cate Blanchett from Nightmare Alley. I'm a big fan of Nightmare Alley, if you hadn't guessed. I think Kristen Stewart from Spencer, playing Lady Diana. Jessica Chastain from The Eyes of Tammy Faye, who's phenomenal. That very, very good performance there. A lot going on there. I like that performance. Elena Haim from Licorice Pizza. I think they're going to give her a nomination because it's a Paul Thomas Anderson film. When Paul Thomas Anderson does anything, usually the people from his films gets a nomination. You can trace that back to The Master or anything like that, or even Phantom Thread. Daniel Day-Lewis got a nomination, etc. But I think the winner for Best Actress is going to be Frances McDormand for Macbeth, because everyone loves Frances McDormand. I think that there's a lot of things, and Frances McDormand is a great actress. There by no means is she bad, but look at her history with the Oscars. She won for Nomadland. She won for freaking 3 Billboards, which was, it wasn't the best of the year, but it wasn't the worst. Still a pretty good movie. People love Frances McDormand. I mean, she won for, I mean, what is it?
For Fargo.
Fargo, yeah. Oh, you betcha. But I think she's going to take it for Macbeth. I think that there's a lot of competition in the Best Actor categories we previously discussed. And I think Denzel Washington is going to get the short end of the stick because there's just so much competition out there. But I think Best Actress, I think it's going to be a Frances McDormand year. I really do. I think she's going to take it again.
And I think part of the reason people are talking more about Frances McDormand than Denzel is because Denzel has played characters like this before. The calm and collective one who secretly has a darker side that he doesn't show until near the end. And plus, he had already gotten the Best Actor Oscar for playing a villain in Training Day. So when I was blown away by Macbeth in the theater, as good as he was, it took me a while to realize that this is technically nothing new and that all my fears of him potentially not being that good of a villain are based on the fact that I haven't seen that many villainous roles of his, even though there are a decent amount, more than we tend to give him credit for. But that plus Frances McDormand can be so sinister without even having to raise her voice. In fact, if anything, like I said before, it's really when she raises her voice during her more remorseful side, especially during that sleepwalking scene, which, wow, that was something.
Yeah, Frances McDormand is the Oscar darling. People love her. She turns in a good performance. I don't see why she wouldn't win. I mean, for Nomadland, she gave a great performance. That movie is all about wandering around. And she delivers that. There's that loneliness. There's that loss. There's that desperation trying to stay alive. And with Macbeth, I mean, it's Shakespeare. People love Shakespeare. People do this. Macbeth is the best of the Shakespeare plays. Frances McDormand has never done a Shakespeare play. So people are going to look at this performance and say, wow. So who do you got for you? You went through everyone there. Did you do your Best Actress thing? Did you?
Not yet. I'm about
No, you go ahead then. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we didn't get to it, but I was just checking.
Okay, so for Best Actress, I have Millie Simmons for A Quiet Place Part 2.
That's good.
She's upgraded from supporting to lead actress, even though even in the opening credits, she's not even listed as the starring point because Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy, even John Krasinski's name is on the Blu-ray and he's in it for only 10 minutes.
I mean, I can definitely see this nomination because if you look at the history of the Academy, they usually nominate those who are very unique in their acting presence. Look at Peanut Butter Falcon. Example, done. They'll get a nomination.
Right, but yeah. Millie Simmons, I have Alana Haim for Licorice Pizza. This is a little bit of an out-of-the-box one, but I really enjoyed Thomasin McKenzie in Last Night in Soho. It's a type of horror performance that with any other actress, it would have been over the top. She would have came across as so needy and stupid in the more vulnerable moments where she's refusing help from others because with something this supernatural, there's no way in hell that in her mind they'd be able to help her out. If anything, they could get killed in the crossfire, which is something that she doesn't want to face. There's so many layers within that performance that she juggled so well, better than almost any other actress her age. And it blows my mind that it was Scarlett Johansson who got nominated for Jojo Rabbit as opposed to her, because as good as Johansson was, it was something that was out of the box for her. And it was one of her better performances in general. Mackenzie she really sold the chemistry with Roman Griffin Davis in a role where, I mean, Davis technically had a harder role where he had to be likable, even though it's not until the last 30 minutes that he actually starts to question his collectivist beliefs. but she still has to be able to appeal to him despite him being a complete bigot. And that's a really tough performance for any actor to give. I also have Frances McDormand for Macbeth, but if it were up to me, I would give Best Actress to Rachel Zegler from West Side Story.
That's a fair pick. I mean, I think, because she's the YouTube star who came out of nowhere, got the audition, right?
I had never heard of her before this. In fact, I've never seen her YouTube channel still, and I've seen West Side Story twice, but that's the great thing about it. She's the rare YouTube star who actually has a versatile amount of talent. And in my position, if I were not to know who she was before, I would still be completely blown away by her singing ability, because she sent chills down my spine during a couple of these songs. And she has to handle the optimism that comes with living in America for the first time, while still being incredibly level-headed about the dangers that could come with it, who's higher up in the food chain compared to her, while also not letting the envy and jealousy that has Bernardo completely consumed, not let that go to her head, try to avoid the hatred that the Jets and the Sharks are trying to accomplish, even in the very end, which I'm not going to spoil because you haven't seen it yet.
I have not. I didn't get to theater, so. But
it's an ending that is not a Spielberg ending in the slightest.
That's good. I like when things
That's
are not
my best way of describing
Spielbergian.
it. And it's just as faithful to the movie and the play in that regard, where she is on the verge of giving into that exact same hatred that has infiltrated her brother, is infiltrating Tony, her love interest. And she tries to avoid that verge by explaining to everyone around her just what would happen if she acted exactly like them, as a reflection of the shit that they're responsible for.
Well, I mean, I could totally see her getting a nomination. But I don't know. She's a YouTube star, so we'll see. You know how the Academy is like against all forms of new media. It usually takes them a few years to warm up. And I think this is the first YouTube star that could be considered.
Right, but at the same time, the Academy is getting more pressure to, how do I put this nicely? Be more considerate to nominees who don't all look the same.
Yeah, well, you know, the Academy is old and white. So,
which is why I find the new rules where, like, I don't know, 30% of the nominees have to not be white, which Lord knows that means they're automatically all gonna win, which that's the one hole in the argument that I can't get behind, but of course nobody wants to question that.
So here's my best picture, because I think we've covered everything, right? We've covered all the categories, right? Do we miss anything?
No.
Okay, so here's what I think. These are the top 10 nominated for Best Picture: Belfast, Tragedy Macbeth, French Dispatch, West Side Story, Dune, Nightmare Alley, Eyes of Tammy Faye, The Green Knight, Spencer, and King Richard. Did I miss anything?
Tell you the truth, I would not be surprised if any of those got on there.
What do you got? What do you got for your...
To tell you the truth, I just listed down my top 10 favorite movies of the year just because it wouldn't make any difference in all seriousness. And there are years where sci-fi and horror do get nominated every now and then. I mean, everyone was blown away that Sigourney Weaver got an Oscar nomination for Aliens, but it was well-deserved either way. And to tell you the truth, most of those I have on my list. I do have Dune, I do have French Dispatch, Green Knight, West Side Story, Belfast, Macbeth, but I also have 1 Second on there because sometimes foreign film nominees do get in there for Best Picture. Alfonso Cuarón got that for Roma.
Yep, good flick.
Luca, just because sometimes animated movies also end up in Best Picture.
I'd be fine with that. That'd be variety. I like the variety idea.
It would be incredibly rare because I think Up and Beauty and the Beast are the only ones to have gotten up there.
That sounds right. I'll take your word on that because I don't know off the top of my head.
Some people wanted Soul to get nominated, which honestly, even though I thought it was a little overrated, it still would have been variety, like you said.
Soul's really good. I just think there's a few major flaws with it, but a charming movie overall.
Yeah, for sure. And I put Quiet Place and Tick Tick Boom on there because Tick Tick Boom can get in just based on it being a musical. It wouldn't be the first time that something like that has happened.
Well, I think they're either going to nominate Tick, Tick, Boom or West Side Story, and I think West Side Story is more likely.
Oh, it's incredibly more likely, and it's a much better musical. And Tick, Tick, Boom does have some stylistic traits that some of which I liked. Lin-Manuel Miranda has definitely learned a lot from stagecraft and filmmaking, just from being behind the scenes as a producer, let alone as a performer. And he clearly shows that. It's just, there are some moments like these weird 4x3 home video style montages that kind of make it out to be a little bit of a documentary that I didn't think were necessary. There aren't as many as some people made it out to be, but there's also a whole framing device where Garfield is narrating his life story on stage, meaning that things have technically, to an extent, have worked out in some capacity or are on the verge of making out. So it takes a tad bit of suspense away from the story. And also, I just put Quiet Place 2 on there just because I love the movie that much. It's a horror film that has the story focus first and then the scares second.
Oh, I know how much you love A Quiet Place.
Which is pretty rare for a horror movie.
But who's your winner? Who are you picking? Best Picture. They announced it. It's not Moonlight. It's
Steve Harvey's fault. That's what it is.
I'm gonna let you finish, but Beyonce had one of the best music videos. Not just kidding.
But I would go with Dune just because there are so many aspects that I think are top notch compared to other movies. The cinematography, the direction, the music, the effects, the performances, the action sequences, the fact that there aren't that many big budget epic movies with action sequences anymore, which except for Lord of the Rings, because there was that one year where Lord of the Rings literally won everything.
Return of the King. That was an achievement though. Like that movie was huge. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. And it was the final chapter that actually, for the most part, delivered on what everyone was expecting.
There is one surprise that I think might sneak into Best Picture. I think that Spider-Man No Way Home might get a Best Picture nomination. People really like that movie. I think it might sneak in. They might go for your consideration from Disney or whatever.
Maybe.
I mean, my winner, though, Belfast. I think Belfast, everyone loves this movie. It's a crowd pleaser. It's the movie of the year. And what I've learned from doing Oscar predictions and looking, people like the movies that make them happy. And Dune could make you very happy. But I think that Belfast appeals to everyone, from my grandma to my mom to my sister could watch it. I could watch it. It's a date movie. It's a happy movie. It's a movie that you could relate to the death of a relative. There's just so much in it to relate to every Oscar voter ever. It doesn't matter who you are. Belfast probably touched your heart and you're like, I like that. I mean, I don't know anyone who disliked Belfast. I mean, the worst reviews coming out of this was, oh, you know, I lived through it. I think they could have gone a different point of view. That's the worst review it got. But they still love Judi Dench. They still love Ciarán Hinds. Jamie, whatever his name is, the father there. Like, everyone loves Belfast. And I think Belfast is going to take Best Picture. It's also black and white. If we look at the history of the Academy, The Artist, Roma, a lot of these movies are black and white that win. It's got the right length. If you look at previous Best Picture winners, they're usually right about 2 hours. Nothing ever 3 hours unless you're looking at epics, and that's the early 60s, and nothing ever about an hour and a half. We're looking right in the middle. That's Belfast. I think it's going to be the Best Picture of the year. So that's my thoughts on it.
You know what? I'd be disappointed, but not mad if Belfast won, because it is such a big crowd pleaser. And what you said about being able to show this to anyone and they would enjoy it, I can totally agree with that.
Because if you look at the previous Best Picture winners, anyone could sit down and watch Roma. Relatable family story, struggles. Anyone could sit down and watch any of the previous ones. Because who won Best Picture last year? My goodness, who's the but if you look at like Saving Private Ryan, should have won Best Picture, obviously.
Yeah. You think?
Yeah, just a bit. I think the only one I think for many, many years, because everyone could sit down and watch Nomadland. Everyone could sit down and watch Green Book.
I don't know about Nomadland just because it is incredibly slow and because
but it is a relatable story. It's a person living in a home and they're trying to make their way of life. All these, like Birdman, anyone could sit down and watch this, whether they enjoy it. That's a thing. 12 Years a Slave, The Hurt Locker, The King's Speech. They're all very accessible movies. I think the only ones that don't really fit this are like Spotlight and Parasite. Though Parasite's great in its own right, and I'm sure we've talked about that one to death. And maybe Shape of Water is a little unapproachable. They call it the Fishman movie, you know. But I think it's a lot more than that. I think it's a really, really groundbreaking picture and just one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. But I'm going to go with Belfast because, I mean, even me as like a harsh critic who's always mad at movies for doing things, the only thing I can find with it is the story pacing's a little bit off, but boo-hoo, I'm probably it not a big deal. You know, like most people don't notice that. So
that seems to be the problem with every modern movie nowadays, that there is uneven pacing. That's something I've noticed over and over as I'm making notes for videos. It's just like, pacing's never going to be 100%. Why am I even bothering?
I would say movies with perfect pacing in the last 20 years, I think Parasite has perfect pacing. I think the way that movie flows from beginning to end possibly has perfect pacing. What else?
Which even then, first time I saw Parasite, I thought there were so many times where it was going to cut to black and then it never did.
But perfect pacing, maybe Isle of Dogs. That was a very well paced and directed film. They knew exactly what they wanted to do. The jokes and the humor were all the same, hit at the right times when they wanted to. I don't think they rushed it. I know that's a really odd one to throw out there in the ring. Did I love Isle of Dogs? No, but I think it was paced. I really enjoyed that movie. I haven't really watched it since it came out though. But that's our Oscar predictions here, Tyler. What do you think? You want to put some money on this? No, just kidding. I'm probably going to be wrong.
Not on your life.
Oh, yeah. No, I usually don't bet too much on the Oscars because I lose. I got a bet with some work friends. So, you know, I've lost. I won twice, lost once. So I'll take the twice times. But it always comes down to, like, when you're doing Oscar bets, it's going to pop down to Oscar short films. And like all the tiny stuff. If you have seen the tiny stuff, you're squared away. That's pretty much where it comes down to. So,
yeah, and Lord knows that animated shorts are the only ones of those I'll ever be going near this time around.
Well, yeah, this year, we're going to cover animated shorts. It's always a joy to watch the animated shorts. We're going to avoid the live action because they just make us angry and they're all political and yada 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 yada.
Incredibly one-sided.
Well, it depends on the short, really. And then documentaries, Oscar documentaries, I will probably cover in a separate video by myself because I'm a big fan, but I know for Tyler, he'd be like, eh.
I'm still debating whether or not I want to do that. It'll depend on what the nominees will be.
And this year, I know for sure one video I want to do with you and one video I'm going to be like, Tyler, we got to do it. I want to cover Cannes. I want to cover the world's best commercials. I think that's just such a fun show. It's such a great time.
Something tells me that I'd be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to play it at the Princess. If not, you can get it online. Cannes they play commercials, music videos, the most creative, diverse, everything from Pepsi commercials to claymation to, you know, the new music video by whoever. And it's just an hour and a half of pure joy. It's delight. It's such a delight. But those are our Oscar picks for the year. Tyler, what are we checking out on your channel this week?
That is an excellent question. I'm still figuring that out because, well, in light of recent events in our parts, it's not entirely clear how much free time we're going to be able to have in order to check up on stuff that we missed last year or to finally finish up some series. I'm in the midst of summing up the courage to finish up my Studio Ghibli series from a year and a half. Just because
what do you got left?
I have From Up on Poppy Hill, Arrietty, Marnie, Kaguya, and When Rises.
Fair enough.
So I kept that on the back burner for the last year and a half just because new movies nowadays need all the help they can get, even the big ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting January, which actually brings us to the topic of our next show. Next time you see us, we'll be talking about movies we're hyped, we're pumped, we're excited for. I'm waving my hands to in 2022. There's a bunch of those, and we've been discussing those because we chat frequently,
Very much.
So there's going to be So many good things to look to. But yeah, I don't want to spoil too much of that because I want you to come back and watch that there. Check out Tyler channel, Tyler Wolf on YouTube with 2 F's for fucking fantastic. It will be in the description. Check out all our old shows. I've been just getting those repurposed. You'll find them here on the channel. And hey, if you got a movie opinion and you disagree with us, I would love to hear it in the comments because it's all about engagement. And at the end of the day, we're going to have different movie opinions. That's just life. No one agrees on the same 2 things. I put Jungle Cruise in my top 10. He put it in his top worst. And that's okay because we're allowed to have, we're allowed to have different opinions. That's the beauty of the movie space. Tyler, you know what time it is. Say something awesome.
And the Oscar goes to me. God damn it, me.
Thanks for joining us on the Josh and Tyler Show. We will see you next time. Man, I pressed the recording button. Where's the button?